So hello and welcome. My name is Pankaj Koshti and I'm a third year undergrad at SGSITS Indore. In this video, I'll walk you through my project. My project title is a ER diagram generator which takes an SQL schema as input and generates a complete ER diagram. We'll go through the key features including how the tables, relationships and the attributes are extracted and visualized. So let's get started. So now let me just show you the quick demo of my project. So this is my driver code, my Python source file, which I written in the VS Code. If I run this code here, as you can see that this is the GUI window for where user can input their SQL schema. Since I have already created a sample SQL schema, I'll just copy paste it. This is the sample SQL schema. If I'll just paste it here in the window, so after pasting the SQL schema, you have to click the button generate ER diagram. If your code is perfectly executed, then you will see that the this message ER diagram generated successfully. If we click on OK, then we can see that this is our resultant ER diagram where we have order items tables, users tables, orders tables, and all the tables which we mentioned in the schema, and along with their attributes with the link, and the relationships between the entity sets are shown by the links. These are the relationship between them. This is a resultant scheme, resultant ER diagram. So this is the basic overview of my project. Mainly, this project uses Python with libraries like SQL parse to parse SQL, Graphies to generate the ER diagrams, and a Kinter to provide a user-friendly interface. When you input an SQL schema, the program reads the table structures, detects relationships, and outputs a visual ER diagram. Now, let's dive into the code and see how this works. Now, as you can see that these are the all imported libraries showing here. I have imported SQL parse library, the Graphies library, and the Kinter library for the GUI window. Okay, first we need to parse the SQL schema into a structured format. I use the SQL parse library for this. Here's the function parse SQL to ER diagram schema that handles the parsing. Function, we extract tables, columns, and foreign keys relationships from the SQL statement. I use tokenization to break down the SQL and the loop through the tokens to identify the table structure. Each table's columns and relationships are stored in a dictionary for a later use. Function takes parsed SQL statements and converts them into a structured schema and relationships. I have initialized two dictionaries, which is one is tables and the second one is a relationship. Tables is for to store each table's columns and the foreign keys, and the relationship is for storing the foreign key relationships. Now you can see the loop here, the for loop. This loop iterates over each parse SQL statement. It checks if the statement is of type create, which indicates the creation of a table. Now we have tokens. I declared a token confirms that the statement is creating a table by checking the first two tokens. Now the next task is to extract table names, columns, and foreign keys. So this code extracts the table name from the third token and initializes columns and foreign keys list for these tables. As you can see that there is a one more for loop here written here. This for loop looks for the token that starts with a bracket which indicates the beginning of a column definition. Now the next part is a column definition. Uh, this definition splits the column definitions into the individual column lines. Each column line is further split into the parts which usually include the column name and the data types. Yeah, the part then. Now handling the foreign key relationships. This whole code checks the foreign key definitions and extracts the reference table and columns. If the definition if the definition does not include constraints and foreign key references, it is considered a regular column and added to a column first. Stores the collected columns and foreign keys for the current table. Here we can see one more for loop which formats the collected data into a readable schema string. It converts each table's columns into a table. We have a table name which is a table name. Now, now the main part of this code, the crux of this code is to extract the names of table relationships and the attributes. Now the second function. Now the next part is once the schema is passed, we generate the ER diagram using the generate ERD function. As we can see this here. Here I use the graphics library to create a visual representation of a tables and their attributes as well as the relationships between them. This is the whole code for the generate ERD function. For each table, a box-shaped node is created. For each attribute, we use ellipse. By the property of ER diagrams, we generally assign ellipse for the attributes and the rectangle box for the table. And the relations between them are represented by lines connecting to the relevant nodes. From the graphics library, we have a dot which create a new directed graph object named dot with the format set as a PNG form. Now we have to create table nodes. We can see that the for loop is here. This for loops iterates over the schema to identify tables and their columns. As you can see that there is one more dot node which will create the table node. uh, it will create the box shape node, which box is mentioned here, box shape node for the table. Now next loop is for create node for the columns. So this creates ellipse shaped nodes. As you can see that here, ellipse shaped nodes for each column, which column is generally attributes and connects them to their respective table nodes. Now the next function is next loop is creating the foreign key relationships. Create edges between tables and based on the foreign key relationships. Now at last we have to renders all the files renders and save the graph to a file. Now to use the program user-friendly, I created a graphical user interface GUI using Thinker. It allows the user to input their SQL schema, click a button, and immediately generate an ER diagram. Here, I use the text area to accept the SQL input and a generate ER diagram button to trigger the parsing and diagram generation. Once the diagram is created, it automatically opens in a PNG file. The code you can see here, it retrieves the SQL query from the text area, parses it using SQL parse, and extracts the schema and relationships. We have a generate ERD function. Generate ERD function calls it is a calling for a generate ERD function, it will call the function to create the ER diagram. Then we have a message box for giving the message to user, which displays the success message and opens the generate ERD image, as you can see that here. Now for the GUI setup and Kinter, uh, we have a I initializes the main window and sets the title as a ER diagram generator. Now the next part is it will create the text area for the SQL input. It creates a label and a scrollable text area for user to input their SQL query. Now the next thing is for the button generate button. I have shown in the demo creates a button that triggers the on generate button click function when clicked. At last, we have a root main.loop. It will start the inter event loop and displays the GUI and waiting for the user interactions. I have created a one more sample SQL schema which is more complex. Now I'll just enter this schema. Okay. Now, as you can see that the output ER diagram is more complex. We can see the more number of links between the attributes and the entity sets, and the more links between the entity set with relationships. Okay. While working on this ER diagram generator project, I encountered several challenges that required problem solving and learning along the way. From choosing the right libraries to understand SQL parsing complexities, each step taught me something new. The first challenge was selecting the appropriate programming language. Python is Since Python is highly readable, which made it easier to write and understand code for parsing SQL and generating diagrams. Additionally, Python's ecosystem of libraries such as SQL parse for parsing for SQL parsing, and we have a Graphies for diagram creation suited my needs perfectly. Plus, Python is cross-platform, making it easier for others user use the tool on any operating system. I choose Kinter because it's a built-in Python library which made the interface lightweight and easy to integrate. However, working with Kinter wasn't without challenges. Initially, I faced some issues with displaying the input and outputs in a way that was both clear and functional. But eventually, I used a text area for input and simple buttons to trigger the diagram generation. In conclusion, building the ER diagram generator was a great learning experience. The challenges I faced from choosing the right libraries to parsing complex SQL queries and generating clean visual outputs taught me valuable lessons about problem solving in software development. Python proved to be the ideal language for this project because of its versatility and the availability of libraries like SQL, Parse, and the Graphies.